This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. The book is Naples, 1944, The Devil's Paradise at War, and the author is Keith Lowe. Acclaimed award-winning historian Lowe has chronicled the end of World War II in Europe in his book Savage Continent and the war's aftermath in the sequel, The Fear and the Freedom. Now in this book, Naples, 1944, The Devil's Paradise at War, Lowe sheds light on the terrible and often unexpected consequences of war in this critical deep dive into the history of Naples during World War II. Keith is an award winning author, as I mentioned, of Savage Continent, Europe in the Aftermath of World War II, and the critically acclaimed history Inferno, The Fiery Devastation of Hamburg, 1943. He is widely recognized as an authority in the Second World War, is often spoken on TV and radio, both in Britain and the United States. He was an historical consultant and one of the main speakers in the PBS documentary, The Bombing of Germany, which was also broadcast in Germany. His books have been translated into more than 20 languages, and he has lectured in Britain, Canada, and Germany, makes his home in North London. Happy to have, for the first time here on Speaking of Writers, Keith Lowe join me. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here.
So why Naples for you? And Keith, part two to it's a two-part question to start. Why has this story never been truly told?
Well, Naples, oh goodness, why Naples? There's lots of reasons for that.
Mm,
I mean, there's personal reasons. I have a sort of personal connection to the city. It's a place I've known since I was a child. But more importantly than that, Naples is the first major city on the European mainland to be liberated during World War II. So, what happens here is kind of an indication of what's going to happen to the whole of the rest of Europe as the Allies progress, liberating country after country on the way up to Berlin in the end. So what happens here is kind of a microcosm of what's going to happen everywhere else. So that's why it's important. Um, why hasn't it been covered before? Well, I mean, there have been one or two memoirs
right.
about it. Norman Lewis's memoir was a very famous one. And then there was a John Horne Burns novel, The Gallery, which was written about Naples. And there's a famous Italian novel as well by Malaparte called The Skin. And these are the sort of three sources that quite a lot of people follow. But they're only individual stories. There's just three individuals telling their view of what Naples was like. But nobody's really gone into what actually happened in the whole of the city before. And so yeah, that's why I chose to do it myself. I'm astonished that it's never happened, but it,
Mm.
it hasn't. So here I am.
Keith, why was Naples a place of great contrast?
Well, there are all kinds of contrasts. You've got the rich and the poor. It was divided even during the war between um, rich and poor. That those who followed the fascists and those who were against them. The Germans on one side, the Italians on the other. And of course, when the Allies arrived, there's this huge contrast between the wealth that the Allies have. They come in with all their food and money, and the locals who are starving, scrabbling to get any kind of food together to feed the kids and so on. So yeah, it's a real contrast between the wealth that the Allies had and the poverty of the locals.
Yeah, it was a mess when the Allies got there, right? I mean, the harbor was destroyed, a lot of ships sunk, the food situation, the water situation too.
Yeah, it was really a catastrophe. When the Allies first arrived, they had multiple crises to deal with. I mean, the city had been bombed by us, right? By the British and the Americans.
Right.
So that had caused a huge amount of damage. It was actually the most bombed city in Italy at the time. Over 100 bombing raids on the city. So that produced its own damage. But then, the Germans were in control of the city for about a month before the Allies turned up. And they didn't want anything of any worth to land in the Allies' lap as they left. So they systematically destroyed the port, all of the hotels, and they looted all the stores. They took away all the transport with them. And and they even started trying to, deport the local population, take them off as slave labor. So, the city was a mess by the time the Allies arrived. So yeah, so the first thing the British and the Americans had to do was to, try to get everything back up and running, trying to get the water system back up, trying to get the sewers to work. The port was, like you mentioned, really destroyed. There were 300 ships sunk in the harbor.
Mhm.
The whole harbor was covered in mines and with a tangle of metal. They had to send divers down to cut through it all. And I mean, getting that harbor back up and running was a real miracle. They managed it in a matter of days. I mean, it's incredible what the engineers managed to do there. So yeah, all these different crises to deal with.
As you mentioned, Naples was the first major European city to be liberated by the Allies, and it was set up as a template that they used for the rest of Europe as well. How did they use it as a template?
Well, I mean, it was they had arrived in Sicily already, so they had some sort of experience with managing local populations. But this was the first really big major city. About 1 million people lived in Naples at the time, just under. And so they've got to administer this city, and it's kind of their practice ground for when they get to even bigger cities further up, Italy and Rome and so on, but also in other parts of Europe. And they kind of didn't know what they were doing. So they're experimenting as they're going along, finding out ways to deal with political situations, with rebuilding stuff, with keeping the war going while they're doing it. So yeah, they're making it up as they go along, and unfortunately, it begins to show. You know, uh,
Mhm.
they didn't always manage things as well as they could have done.
Yeah, did they do enough?
I mean, with hindsight, no. At the time, they didn't really know this. They made a plan. They kind of thought they knew they were on top of things, but there were just so many crises to deal with. They didn't have the manpower, and while the army was doing quite a good job of rebuilding stuff, uh, you've still got a million people to govern, and they're starving. There's a lot going on. And you trying to prosecute a war at the same time as doing this is a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and then this influx of food and supplies, and then the black market starts there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the great problem. They just mismanage things really badly. So, you've got all this food coming through the port. Naples becomes the biggest port in the world in
Mhm.
1944. It's bigger than New York, bigger than London. You've got all this material coming through to sort of feed the fighting at the front. But in January 1944, a third of the material that goes through that port never makes it to the warehouse. Their systems of checking things just goes out the window, and a whole. I'm not talking just about lorries, lorry loads full of stuff going missing. I'm talking about whole convoys disappear. They just don't know where it's gone to, and it turns out that a lot of the Allied soldiers are kind of on the make. They realize an opportunity for making their own fortunes, and they just take it off and sell it off to the locals, and supply the black market. And this happens on a small scale with just the average soldier occasionally, selling his blankets or selling his uniform sometimes to the locals, selling maybe the odd can of food here and there. And it goes all the way through to a massive scale where you get like huge operations. Like Milo Minderbinder in Catch 22, the guy who sells the silk for the parachutes
Hmm.
in order to make his fortune. It's kind of like that. That's based on the atmosphere there was in Italy at the time.
And then March of 44 rolls around, and then Vesuvius erupts.
Yeah, goodness. I mean, the poor people of Naples, they just can't catch a break, can they?
No,
They've got, a food crisis, they've got a water crisis. There's even a typhus epidemic going on
and
there,
typhus too. Yeah, yeah.
and then Vesuvius erupts, they've got to deal with that too. They just poor people can't catch a break.
Keith, what was your research process like? When did you begin it? I think it was before COVID, right? It hit, right?
Yeah, COVID kind of got in the way.
Mm.
I literally just signed the contract when suddenly lockdown happened. There was no international travel, all the archives closed, and it really put a spanner in the works. But when things started to open up again, I got to go to Italy and spend a lot of time there in the archives there. I had some real help from America. It's amazing what local small like divisional archives hold.
Mm.
A lot of this stuff has been untapped. There are stories there which have never been told before. And the museums themselves were so helpful. They put interns on working on the project for me and sent me all this stuff. It's incredible. Yeah, I got loads of really good stories from little archives in the States, and of course, all the Allied military documents are all held in Washington in the National Archives. Yeah, that was the process. A lot of work. Hope it was worthwhile in the end.
What is Naples like today?
Ah, I mean, it's very different to how it was even 20 years ago.
Mm.
I mean, I remember going there as a kid and seeing, black marketeers on the street selling, bogus cigarettes and all kinds of contraband. You don't really see that so much anymore. It's a much more settled, law-abiding place. The mafia activity has been dampened down quite a bit. It's actually a lovely place to visit. I was there just 2 weeks ago. Absolutely fantastic place. Beautiful. You don't get a view like the view of the bay anywhere in the world. It's magical going up on the hill and looking across the bay towards Vesuvius. It's a beautiful place.
As you went through all of that research, I'm sure there was a lot of stuff that surprised you, but a couple of surprises about Naples in 44.
Yeah, there were some quite sort of harrowing stories actually. I mean, there were the stories of. I'll tell you the thing that stuck with me most was the exploitation of women.
Mm.
Really was quite shocking. I mean, you've got a whole load of GIs who are on leave there, with money in their pockets and not a lot of time in which to spend it. And a lot of them think that they're going back to the front where they might die. So they're young men and they want to lose their virginity or whatever it is they want to do. And so they spend their money on sleeping with the local women, and the women kind of they're obliged to do it because
Yeah,
they're starving. They've got to
yeah.
feed the kids, and suddenly there's this guy on your doorstep with boxes of food. What do you do? So yeah, a lot of women um, succumb to this, and yeah, the exploitation of women along the way, and it wasn't just women, by the way. We were also talking young girls. I mean
Mm.
that was the thing that really shocked me. The exploitation of 10, 12-year-old girls and the willingness of British and American soldiers who were there at the time to admit to doing this. There's no sort of shame about it in some of their memoirs. It's kind of that was really shocking. That was really shocking.
And Keith, what would you like readers to take away from Naples 1944?
I would like them to see this as a kind of microcosm of what was happening all across Europe in the aftermath of the liberation. Because, you know, we've got this idea the war is this terrible event, but once the fighting stops, everything kind of goes back to normal. And I just want people to realize that, war is just the first step. What happens next is also really interesting, really brutal, um, has real moral consequences for the lives of local populations. And this goes on, for months, sometimes years after the war is supposed to be over. Naples is a perfect example of that. When the Allies came through, they liberated it. Everything was great. Everyone celebrated. But actually, the next couple of years were really hard as well. Starvation, sickness, exploitation, poverty. It was a really hard time for a long time after the war was supposed to be over.
What is next for you in your writing? Are you staying in World War II?
Um, I'm not quite sure yet. I mean, I've got a proposal in mind where I'll be talking more generally about the aftermaths of wars, not just World War II, but also wars more recently, such as Iraq and Syria, Gaza.
Mm.
Because the same themes come up again and again after the war is finished. Everywhere you always get this sort of hardship and hunger and economic collapse and breakdown of law and order. And I want to explore those themes, not just in World War II, but throughout the ages up until today as well. So we'll see if that comes off.
He's got a website, keithlowhistory.com. He's got great content up there, and he's also on X too, at Keith Lowe, author. The book is Naples, 1944. The Devil's Paradise at War. The author, Keith Lowe. Keith, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And this is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. Thanks for watching.